Welcome back to my channel, guys. This is just a quick rant, something I've been thinking about, although I feel like I always start these videos saying it's a quick rant, and then it ends up being a 10-minute video, so we'll see how long this one ends up being. I just came home from brunch. It's an eerie, melancholy, gloomy day in Miami. It's been raining all day, on and off, which is not unusual for this time of year. It's the time of year where the humidity really skyrockets in Miami. Always happens around May, June, where it really intensifies, and it's basically summer begins early every year. And because of the humidity, it rains quite a bit, right? It's a tropical climate. So anyway, it was raining and gloomy out. Took my umbrella and went for a stroll and went to this spot to get brunch. So of course, because it was raining, everybody was indoors at this place that is usually very busy and bustling on their outdoor like patio area or terrace area. So I sit down, I order, and then I just people watch because that's how I am. And I noticed that almost everybody at this place, and I would say almost everyone was 20 something or 30 something. There were about a dozen people in the restaurant and almost every single person was on their phone. Even the people in a group were not really engaging with each other, and they're all on their own devices, on their phones in front of them. So just picture me sitting at this place. It's raining outside. You can see the rain come down hard. And this restaurant is mostly quiet. There's music playing, of course, in the background, like in all restaurants, but I just found it so depressing that I'm looking at all these people and everybody's on their own phones. People are barely talking to each other. I just found it so demoralizing. And then I look over at the bar, meaning the area, not like a bar, but you know, oftentimes at these restaurants, they'll have a seated area with stools where people are also eating, like if they came in by themselves, like me, except that I'm high maintenance, so I like to have a sit down table. Oh God, the rain is coming down hard again, in case you guys can hear that. So it's a nice backdrop though, is it not, to this story? And I see four people on these stools, these three girls who are together, who seem to be visiting, and this guy who also seems to be visiting, and he's by himself. And I see from a distance that he's talking to them and asking them where they're from, not in like a flirtatious way. It seemed to me just like a casual, friendly, he has nothing better to do, nobody to talk to, so he's just making small talk. And the look on the girl's face right next to him, she just looked so awkward in the way she was responding to him. I don't know if she felt uncomfortable. I don't know if she's just socially awkward. But point is, they have a quick back and forth, small talk, and then all four of them back to their phones, back to their devices. And I really felt for this guy because I thought, we should all be more like that. We should all be making more of an effort to just engage with people around us. And he was doing that, but after this interaction didn't go so well, it's like, of course, he's now prompted to do what everybody else is conditioned to do, which is isolate and be on your phone, right? And I think this is a societal issue that everybody is just more comfortable self-isolating, not making an effort to engage with other people. And I've talked about this before on my channel, how I'm very concerned that I feel like Gen Z in particular, and I think millennials struggle with this too, but I think Gen Z in particular is totally indulged in not engaging with others and developing those social cues. And it's like when you're an adult, nobody's gonna take your phone away, right? So, especially if you've been relying on a device now since childhood, meaning even in school, kids now use laptops. So it's like you're now conditioned to always have that as a crutch. So anyway, this reminded me of actually a few days ago, I met up with this guy. I hooked up with this guy. We had a great time. He was a little bit, again, socially awkward, also Gen Z. I don't know what's happening, but suddenly the younger guys are hitting up your boy. But a little bit awkward, but like in a way that I thought was sweet and endearing. And then as soon as we're done having fun, Again, straight to his phone. And what that registers to me as somebody who just had casual fun with a guy is like, oh, he wants me to get the F out of here. You know, if you pull up, if you create a barrier, just like the guy at the bar that I saw, right, at the restaurant today, the immediate reaction in the other party is going to be, oh, they don't really want to talk to me, so I have to move on. And so, you know, I was a little taken aback by that, because after you do something so intimate with someone, for them to just disassociate and now they're in their own little universe on their phone, it feels a little bit feels rude and uncomfortable, I guess. I would at least, if I wanted somebody to get out of my place for whatever reason, I would at least have enough tact to communicate like, hey, I actually have to do XYZ. So to me, it's just not how I would act, to go straight to my phone and while somebody's just standing there. But anyway, I'm on my way out and he stops me and kisses me and says, I hope I see you again before I leave town. And it's interesting because in that moment it was bittersweet, because I thought, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, we had a nice time. He's not like kicking me out. But at the same time, in my head, I thought, I'm not really interested in seeing you again, because I don't want to attract somebody who lacks that kind of social grace to put up such a clear barrier by staring at their phone after doing the most intimate thing you can do with someone. And so this brings me to the point of the video, which is I'm really concerned for where society is going. And I know I'm not adding anything new into the discussion here. None of this is like a revolutionary take, but I feel like I'm living it more than ever, particularly the last year or two, particularly since COVID, I would say. I'm noticing it more and more, how people are so comfortable disassociating themselves, like disengaging from just the basic effort of making a conversation, making eye contact when you're talking to somebody. And you can tell when somebody's just a little bit like nervous, or that it's like a social anxiety thing. But I think what bothers me is the lack of effort people make. It's one thing to have social anxiety, or, you're an introvert, a classic introvert or whatever, but the idea of completely removing yourself from a situation mentally and socially by turning all your attention to something that it's not helping you in any way to stare at your phone, right? It's not like there's no growth there. You're just gonna play a game or check Instagram, or like there's nothing you're doing that could possibly be contributing to your evolution as a person. And I'm like, in the meantime, you're missing out on meeting people. You're missing out on interacting with somebody who could be interesting. Without sounding too depressing, I actually think there's something we can do here beyond just our own self-awareness and effort to not mimic that effect. So for example, at this restaurant, seeing everybody do this made me not want to look at my phone. And it made me want to make sure I made eye contact with the server when she came over, because I realized she must be dealing with this all day. People who can't even have a normal conversation with her because they're so distracted. Obviously, all we can really control is ourselves, right? That's my point. But I do think there's something else that you can do here in these situations, which is call it out. And yeah, that's not kosher, but it's also not kosher to whip out your phone and ignore somebody after you just had sex with them. So it's funny thinking about all this morning while I'm sitting here in my apartment and looking at the rain outside my window. It jogged my memory that almost exactly this time last year, I was in New York City for a wedding, and I hooked up with a guy in New York too, and we had a great chemistry. And same thing, he got on his phone immediately after. I took a chance and I said, I was getting dressed and about to leave his place, and I said, do you want to cuddle? And he lit up and was like, okay, come over. We cuddled, and while cuddling, we talked for a good, like, at least half hour. And it was something I hadn't experienced in a while, which is actual intimacy beyond just a hookup, and actual vulnerability with somebody who I knew there was a good chance I would never see him again. But in that moment, you connect and you go with it. And I brought it up. I said, hey, it's interesting that we're clicking like this, because when you took out your phone as I was getting dressed, that made me think you were maybe a little bit like cold, or at best that you just wanted me to get out and you just didn't want to deal with me anymore. So it's funny that I'm seeing this side to you that's actually much warmer. So I was very blunt in sharing that. And I guess subconsciously it was probably because I wanted him to realize the effect that had, or should have had, because any other person would have taken that cue and been like, all right, I'm out of here. But something in me in that moment believed in the chemistry up until that point. And so I went with, the chutzpah to ask if he wanted to cuddle. And he was like, you know what, you're right. I wasn't even like consciously doing it, but I think subconsciously you're right that it's just a habit of going straight to your phone and kind of disengaging and moving on to the next thing. By the way, that guy, after that happened, we texted a little bit for a few days while I was at this wedding. And then that was it. And then we never spoke again. And I just got the same vibe from him with texting, that he had a wall up. And this is something I feel like I'm experiencing more and more, and maybe I'm attracting it more and more for a reason. Maybe I'm putting up a wall in other ways without realizing it, so it's making me attract other guys who put up walls in their own way. I'm not sure, but I am noticing that more and more guys that I meet, and I don't know if this applies to straight people, I don't know if it's something beyond just the gay world, but I find that more and more people are just disengaging, and it's comfortable for them to just disassociate, like I saw at the restaurant today with all these people on their phones. And maybe I'm also coming from a perspective of somebody who comes from another culture, and in certain other cultures, the community element is more important. I think in America that's less important. I mean, nowadays I can go to the supermarket, to Whole Foods, without interacting with any human beings, because the cash register now it's all self-checkout at the Whole Foods that I go to. And a lot of things like that in America exist, where it's very convenience oriented. Uber Eats, Amazon delivery. I'm trying to think of what other examples. Even just paying your bills online, right? It used to be that you had to call. And all these things are amazing luxuries and so much more convenient, right? And you save time and more efficient, and all that is fantastic. But I do wonder the long-term effect of all these things together, accumulated, how comfortable we become not wanting to engage or interact with other people. And I think in other cultures, there's less of this opportunity to disconnect. A typical interaction when you walk into a boulangerie in France, a bakery, is they greet you and you greet them. Bonjour madame, bonjour monsieur. And it's very old school, but there's something charming about, you can't really escape it, and you don't want to escape it. It's like a sign of just, you're going about your day and you're interacting with local people. And that kind of thing doesn't exist the same way in America, at least the places where I have lived. I'm sure there are small towns in America where maybe it's more, they are more community oriented because they're small towns where everybody knows each other. So maybe I'm generalizing, I don't know. But I do think there's a cultural element to this. And I'm just concerned about like what we're missing out on, and the kind of culture we're manifesting and creating for ourselves that isn't necessarily beneficial, at least when it comes to the social component. We're social creatures, we're a social species. We need, to an extent, we need comfort and interaction and to be able to feel each other's energy and all this stuff. And I'm most, afraid for Gen Z and the generations after, because if that's what you grew up with, if you went to high school or middle school during the pandemic, there has to be some kind of effect on your social skills that you spent years only interacting with your family or interacting with your teachers and your your friends at school through a screen. I told you this rant would end up being longer than I intended. Curious as always what you guys think. Let me know in the comments.